Good afternoon, everyone. Myself Kuldeep Sharma, working as Assistant Professor, College of Agriculture Sciences, IIMT University, Meerut. Today I am here to deliver a lecture on weeds and its classification. Weeds. Weeds is an unwanted plant where it is not desired. What is weed? A great Britain farmer Jethro Tull was the first person who have defined weeds in 1731 in his book House Hoeing Husbandry. A weed is a plant growing where it is not desired. A weed is a plant growing out of its place. यानी कि अगर हम बात करें कि किसी क्रॉप में जो भी अनवांटेड प्लांट होता है हम उसको वीड कहते हैं. सपोज दैट कि हमारा विंटर सीजन है और वीट क्रॉप में कोई मस्टर्ड का प्लांट उग जाता है तो वो भी क्या है, वीड है. ए प्लांट कुड बी अनडिजायरेबल एट वन प्लेस एंड desirable at other place. For example, haryali, foxtail and goose grass are valuable plant in pasture, but in crop field these are well known troublesome weeds. Classification of weeds based on life cycle. Based on life cycle, there are many types of weed. Annual weed, that weed which complete their life cycle in 1 year is called annual weed. They are further classified into Kharif season annual weeds, Sataria glauca, Rabi season annual weeds, for example, Chenopodium album, Avena fatua, and Phalaris minor. You can say the Phalaris minor is known as the gulli danda and mimicry weed of the wheat crop. Summer season annual weeds, for example, Arzimon mexicana, multi-season annual weeds, Echinocolla colonum in paddy crop and Eucalypta alba. You can see the picture of weeds, Sataria glauca, Chenopodium album जिसको आप बथुआ कहते हैं, and Eucalypta alba. Biennial weeds, that weed which complete their life cycle in 2 years. And if I talk about the first year, it's complete vegetative growth. And if I talk about the second year, it completes its reproductive growth. For example, Dacus carota, Cirsium vulgare, and Avena fatua is also example of biennial weeds. Avena fatua has 3 types: dormancy, perennial weeds. That weed which complete their life cycle more than 3 years is called perennial weeds. For example, simple perennial, Ipomia carinea, Lantana camera, bulbous perennial, wild onion, alumen vanilli, creeping perennials. यानी ऐसे वीड्स जो रैंकर बढ़ते हैं उनको creeping perennials कहते हैं. फॉर एग्जांपल sorghum हेलिपेंस. यू कैन सी द पिक्चर, Iponia carina, wild onion, sorghum helicans. Based on cotyledon, the 2 main categories based on cotyledon numbers are monocot weeds, that weed which produce monocot seeds and has narrow leaf is called monocot weed. These weeds have single cotyledon. Example include grasses such as crab grasses and Bermuda grasses. Bermuda grasses means cynodon dactylon. It produces 140 seeds per plant in its life cycle, and it is also called as devil grass. Sages and some broadleaf weeds like goose grass. Dicotyledous weed, that weed which produce dicot seeds and have narrow broadleaf is called dicotyledous weed. Example include many broadleaf weeds like dandelion, broadleaf, plantain and lamb squatters. You can see the picture of dicot weeds. This is a Solanum nigrum, जिसको आप कॉमन लैंग्वेज में कहते हैं मकोए. It's produce dicot seeds and it's have, you can see, broadleaf. Based on nutrients uptake, and you can see nitrophilous weed, and that weed which uptake nitrogen from the soil is called nitrophilous weed. Nitro means nitrogen, philous means like or lover, and weed unwanted plant. That weed which uptake nitrogen from the soil is known as nitrophilus weed. And if I talk about the nitrophilus weed, Amaranthus viridis. Amaranthus viridis is a nitrophilus weed. It uptakes 3.6% nitrogen of its dry matter from the soil. You can see the picture Amaranthus viridis, and in common language you can say this is a जंगली चौलाई. ये अपने ड्राई जो मैटर है उसका 3.6% नाइट्रोजन कंज्यूम करता है और सोइल से सबसे ज्यादा ये नाइट्रोजन को अपटेक करता है. नाउ it is a phosphophilous weed. That weed which uptake phosphorus from the soil is called phosphophilous weed. For example, Digitaria, it uptake 3.0% phosphorus of its dry matter from the soil. This is a picture of Digitaria. Potassium philous weed. As you know, potassium philous weed. That weed which like to uptake potassium from the soil is called potassium philous weed. You can see the example Chenopodium album, जिसको आप हिंदी में बोलते हैं बथुआ. ये 72,000 सीड्स ग्रो करता है पर प्लांट इन इट्स लाइफ साइकिल. तो ये क्या है? पोटेशियम फिलस वीड, यानी कि सोइल से जो सबसे ज्यादा मात्रा में लेता है पोटेशियम को अपटेक करता है. Zinc Fus Weed. That weed which like to uptake zinc from the soil is called Zinc Fus Weed. For example, Sataria, luticens, uptake 585 ppm part per million zinc of its dry matter from the soil. जो जिंक फिलिस वीड है जैसे कि सैटेरिया लूटिसेंस है, ये 585 ppm जिंक को अपटेक करता है सोइल से इसके ड्राई मैटर से. Based on parasite, there are two types of weeds based on parasite: stem parasite and root parasite. First one is stem parasite weed. That weed which is depend on the main crop plant stem for food is called stem parasite weeds. There are two types of stem parasite weeds. First one is total stem parasite weed and second one is partial stem parasite weed. That weed which is totally depend on the stem of main crop plant for food is called total stem parasite. For example, Cuscuta reflexa. This is the Cuscuta reflexa, जिसको लोकल लैंग्वेज में अमरबेल कहते हैं. ये क्या है? टोटल स्टेम पैरासाइट वीड है. एंड इफ आई टॉक अबाउट द पार्शियल स्टेम पैरासाइट वीड, दैट वीड विच इज पार्शियली डिपेंड ऑन the stem of main crop plant for food is called partial stem parasite weed. For example, Loranthus. You can see this is a picture of Loranthus and this is a partial stem parasite weed. Based on root parasite, that weed which depend on roots of main crop plant for foods is called root parasite weeds. There are also two types of roots parasite weed. First one is total root parasite weed and second one is partial root parasite weed. That weed which is totally depend on the roots of main crop plants for food is called total root parasite weed. For example, Orobanki. Orobanki is the example of total root parasite weed. And if I talk about the partial root parasite weed, that weed which is partially depend on the roots of main crop plant for food is called partial root parasite weed. For example, Striga. Striga grow more than 1 crore seed per plant its life cycle, यानी कि अपने लाइफ साइकिल में पर प्लांट से 1 करोड़ सीड पैदा करता है वीड का. बेस्ड ऑन नेचर, नेचर के आधार पर क्लासिफिकेशन ऑफ वीड्स. फर्स्ट वन इज रोग वीड. If a plant of different variety grow in main crop, then it is called rogue weed. For example, you can see the picture. This is the main crop HD 2967 variety of the wheat crop, and this is the plant of DBW 303 of wheat crop. If DBW 303 plant is grown in our main crop HD 2967 wheat crop, then DBW 303 is a rogue weed. तो ये एग्जाम्पल किसका है आपका? ये रोग वीड्स का एग्जाम्पल है. Mimicry weed. What is mimicry weed? That weed which is phenotypically same to the main crop is called mimicry weed. For example, you can see the Phalaris minor is a mimicry weed in wheat crop. And if I talk about the paddy crop, Echinocolla colonum is a mimicry weed of the paddy crop. And if I talk about the Avena fatua, is the mimicry weed of oats. Avena fatua in oats, Echinocolla colonum in paddy crop. These are the example of mimicry weed. Next, ephemeral weeds. That weed which grow in rainy season and complete their life cycle in 4 to 6 weeks is called ephemeral weeds. For example, Phyllanthus neruri. Is the example of ephemeral weeds. You can see the picture of Phyllanthus neruri. ये वीड ऐसा वीड है जब हमारा रेनी सीजन आता है जून से जुलाई, उस टाइम पर ग्रो करता है एंड 4 से 6 वीक में अपनी लाइफ साइकिल को कंप्लीट करता है. नेक्स्ट, नॉक्सियस वीड. जैसे कि आप इसके नाम से देख रहे हैं नॉक्सियस यानी कि शैतान वीड. That weed which is very difficult to control is called noxious weed. For example, Cynodon dactylon is a example of noxious weed. And साइनोडोन डैक्टाइलोन को बर्मुडा ग्रास भी कहते हैं इन लोकल लैंग्वेज. बरमूडा ग्रास। और जैसा कि आप जानते हैं कि दिस इज अ एग्जांपल ऑफ नॉक्सियस वीड, सो वी कैन से डेविल वीड और डेविल ग्रास। And second example is Cyprus rotundus. जिसको आप जर्नल लैंग्वेज में कहते हैं मोथा, यानी मोथा इज ऑल्सो एग्जाम्पल ऑफ नॉक्सियस वीड। नेक्स्ट सैटेलाइट वीड, दैट वीड which grow and ripe at the time of main crop harvesting is called satellite weed। यानी कि ये ऐसे वीड्स हैं जो उस समय पककर तैयार होते हैं जिस समय हमारी मेन क्रॉप पककर तैयार होती है, और एट द टाइम ऑफ हार्वेस्टिंग ऑफ द मेन क्रॉप सैटेलाइट वीड्स के जो सीड्स होते हैं वो हमारी मेन क्रॉप में मिल जाते हैं, जिसके कारण इन वीड्स को मेन क्रॉप के सीड से अलग करना काफी डिफिकल्ट होता है। फॉर एग्जाम्पल Avena fatua. This is a picture of Avena fatua. In local language, this is a jungly jay. Next, volunteer weed. If a plant of previous crop is grown in main crop, then it is a volunteer weed. You can see this is a kharif season crop, and if a plant of kharif season crop grow in our winter season crop, then that is volunteer weed. Next, field bind weed. जैसा कि आप नाम से देख रहे हैं फील्ड बाइंड वीड, दैट वीड विच बाइंड द फील्ड इज कॉल्ड फील्ड बाइंड वीड। फॉर एग्जांपल कॉनवोलुलेंस आर्वेंसिस, जिसको हिरन खुरी, हिंदी लैंग्वेज में कहते हैं इसको हिरन खुरी। इसकी जो सीड विएबिलिटी होती है मोर देन 50 ईयर्स, यानी अगर हिरन खुरी का कोई वीड है वो सोइल में पड़ा है तो उसकी विएबिलिटी मोर देन 50 ईयर्स है। तो ये एक एग्जांपल है फील्ड बाइंड वीड इन वीट क्रॉप। Characteristics of weed. Nature has bestowed the following qualities on weeds. First one is prolific seed production, produce larger number of seed compared to crop. Second, in general, annual weeds are characterized by the production of very large number of seeds. Next, seed production varies from 40 to 1,96,000 numbers of seeds per plant its life cycle. यानी कि सीड प्रोडक्शन के आधार पर हम वीड्स का क्लासिफिकेशन करेंगे। यू कैन सी अमरएंथस स्पेसीज। अगर हम बात करें अमरएंथस विरिडिस की, अमरएंथस विरिडिस ग्रो 1,96,000 सीड्स पर प्लांट इट्स लाइफ साइकिल, यानी कि 1,96,000 सीड पैदा करता है ये वीड प्लांट अपनी लाइफ साइकिल में। सेकंड, कस्कुटा रिफ्लेक्सा, जिसको आप अमरबेल कहते हैं। अमरबेल अपने जो एक प्लांट होता है वो अपनी लाइफ साइकिल में 16,000 सीड्स पर प्लांट ग्रो करता है। नेक्स्ट, चिनोपोडियम एल्बम, जिसको आप जर्नल लैंग्वेज में बथुआ कहते हैं, ये 72,000 सीड्स पर प्लांट ग्रो करता है अपने लाइफ साइकिल में। नेक्स्ट, साइनोडोन डैक्टाइलोन, जिसको अभी हमने बताया कि बरमूडा ग्रास, डेविल ग्रास, दूब घास, ये अपनी लाइफ साइकिल में 170 सीड्स पर प्लांट ग्रो करता है। नेक्स्ट साइप्रस रोटंडस, जिसका दूसरा नाम है पर्पल नट सेल्स। ये अपनी लाइफ साइकिल में 40 सीड्स पर प्लांट ग्रो करता है। एंड साइनोडोन डैक्टाइलोन एंड साइप्रस रोटंडस बोथ आर द एग्जांपल ऑफ नॉक्सियस वीड। नेक्स्ट कैमेलिना बेंगेलेंसिस, it produce 2450 seeds per plant its life cycle. Next Portulaca species produce 1,93,000 seeds per plant. Next Trianthema species grow 52,000 seeds per plant by its life cycle. Next Solanum nigrum, in general language you can say makoe. Solanum nigrum produce 1,78,000 seeds per plant on its life cycle. Next Illucin indica, it's produce 41,200 seeds per plant by its life cycle. Today I discussed about weeds and its classification. So thank you very much.